Hi Natto fans, this is Natto Dad. Continuing with our non-soybean natto series, we turn our attention to pinto beans. A few people had requested pinto beans, and this bean is really popular and common in the US, and they can be found in any supermarket, so let's see how it turns out. For this run, I pressure steamed half of the batch, and the second batch I boiled to see how they differ. I rinsed and drained the beans 3 times and then added water to humidify the beans. The next day, after 18 hours, I drained the beans, and then I have 2 trials. One will be by boiling the beans, and the other one will be with my usual pressure steaming the beans to see how they turn out. Okay, when the beans are almost done cooking, you can start sanitizing the vessels. I use boiling water, and once the water is cool, you can drain the water and let it dry. Pressure steaming the beans always cooks the beans faster than boiling, so after 40 minutes the beans are ready to go. So I add the frozen starter and then mix thoroughly and put in the oven. I almost forgot to mention this, but with pressure steamed beans, I usually add 2 to 3 spoonfuls of water from the bottom of the pan to add extra moisture. Mix thoroughly to spread out the bacteria, and then after that I use the double cling method to trap the moisture inside the fermentation. On the first cling wrap, poke the holes, and this will be sitting on top of the beans. And on the second cling wrap, poke holes as the first one, and then leave on top to create an air pocket between the first layer and the second layer. For this second trial, I also added the frozen starter, mixed thoroughly, and then I applied the double cling method. Set the fermentation temperature to between 38 degrees Celsius and 40 degrees Celsius, which is 100 degrees Fahrenheit to 108 degrees Fahrenheit. My heating source usually overshoots the temperature, and that is why I set it to 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Finally, after 20 hours, we can see the results. On the left is the pressure steamed beans, and on the right the boiled beans. As you can see, on the pressure steamed beans, there is not much white growth on the surface of the beans, but there is stickiness to the beans. I tasted the beans, and although it had good flavor, the beans were a little bit hard and the texture was not too good. Now when I do the soy sauce test, you can see that after mixing, the threads become a little bit weaker, which tells me that the threads are not too strong. Okay, now the results for the boiled beans. So the pinto beans were boiled for 2.5 hours. The beans had a nice halo around it, but I could already tell that the beans did not have as much thread as the pressure steam beans. As you can see, the threads are a little bit thick and short, and I usually associate this with beans being too wet, and this is consistent with beans I have done when I boil, where the threads are not as strong. The other problem I find with boiled beans is that you lose a lot of flavor which goes into the boiling water, and probably the nutrients are also being leached out of the beans. Doing the soy sauce test on the boiled beans, you can see that the threads are nice and thick, but again, the threads are a little bit short for my liking. To conclude, the pressure steam pinto beans had strong threads, but they were a little bit thin. Flavor was good, but unfortunately the texture was a little bit hard and a bit dry, so I wouldn't recommend this cooking method for pinto beans. As for boiled pinto beans, it had decent growth, but the threads were a little bit thick and short. The flavor was what got to me, as it was very thin and the texture was a little bit mushy. As you can tell, pinto bean natto was not my favorite, but I think there's definitely room for improvement if you want to keep trying. As for me, I'll be trying black bean natto next, so see you on the next one. Stay tuned.